Hey, I'm Chuck Dransfield, and for the month of October, I'm going to be covering tales of Hollywood notoriety and famous ghost stories. And I thought the place to start would be right here with the legendary Hollywood sign right up here on the mountaintop. It's the site of one of the most notorious and legendary suicides in probably the entire history of Hollywood, when Peg Entwistl, a young actress from Broadway who came out here to try her luck in the movies, finally had enough and apparently decided to make the most dramatic of exits. She climbed to the top of the letter H, plunged to her death, had a suicide note attached to her body, and she was found about a day or two later. Her remains were cremated, sent back to her hometown in Ohio, where she was buried next to her father. Probably the irony is she became far more legendary because of this than she ever would had she had any success in the movies. Hi, I'm Chuck Dransfield, and I am front of one of the most famous structures in all of Los Angeles, the Sowden House, which was built in 1926 by legendary architect Frank Lloyd Wright. Today it is nicknamed the Jaws House because of its resemblance to the iconic image from the movie poster for Jaws. But it's also allegedly the site of one of the most gruesome murders and tragedies in all of Hollywood folklore. In the mid-1940s, a man named Dr. George Hodel owned the house, resided here, and supposedly he brought back an actress named Elizabeth Short, known as the Black Dahlia, to this house, where allegedly he tortured her, murdered her, and then dismembered her body with surgical precision. Dr. Hodel's own son in the early 2000s, his son, an investigative journalist, wrote a book and compiled enough evidence to heavily implicate his father and more or less prove what happened here in this house back in the late 1940s. Hey, I'm Chuck Dransfield in front of the Hollymont apartments here in Los Feliz on Vermont Avenue in Los Angeles. I decided to come here today because for decades there have been rumors that this building is haunted. Residents have reported usually small things, like doorbells ringing for no apparent reason. Someone once said an ice tray abruptly flew out of their freezer, went out the door, and sailed into the living room toward one of the guests. Reports of chairs moving, goblets moving, that sort of thing. A lot of benign ghost stories, and who knows if they're authentic, but I just thought this would be a fun place to come to. Also, because at one time actors Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor had an apartment here. It's a little bit of Hollywood history there for you. Hey, I'm Chuck Dransfield, and I am standing in front of the historic Ravenswood's apartments here in the Hancock Park district of Los Angeles. This was built in 1930 by Paramount Studios, located nearby, so they could house all of the talent, the actors, the writers, the creative people they were bringing out from the East Coast, mainly from Broadway, because it was the transitionatory period between silent and sound motion pictures. Mae West, having had her own triumphs on Broadway, signed a contract with Paramount in 1933, and this is where she came to live, on the 6th floor in apartment 611. Now, Mae stayed here until the remainder of her life, and when she died in 1980. She kept her apartment a perfect time capsule of 1930s Hollywood. It was all furnished in white and gold, and she never once varied it, kept it everything exactly as it was. The new owners, when they moved in after May's death, said that May's presence was very much known. She was not ready to leave anytime soon. And one of the first clues they had was May was known to detest television in the living room. Well, the new owners, they found that their television worked perfectly in every single room except for the living room, where it would not get a signal. They had to give up. But the new owners also said that from time to time they would have seances, and May was always delighted to chime in with her, "Oh, come up and see me sometime." Hey, I'm Chuck Dransfield, and I am at Hollywood Forever Cemetery in Hollywood, standing in front of the crypt of the legendary silent screen star Rudolph Valentino, who died at the age of 31 of a ruptured ulcer in 1926. For the 97 years of his death, every anniversary, the infamous Lady in Black appears, dressed head to toe in black, with a thick veil covering her face, where she comes to here and lays a red rose at his grave. There's been so much speculation. Some thought it was actress Pola Negri who was doing this, and maybe doing it as a bit of publicity for herself, to be seen laying a red rose while she was decked out in her mourning clothes from her alleged lover Valentino. But in all likelihood, it's just been different women over the years who have assumed the mantle. One of the most interesting and probably the most credible was a woman whose family knew Valentino, and she claimed that she was the woman in black for 30 years. And the story went that when she was 14 years old, she was gravely ill, thought she was going to die, and Valentino came and gave her a red rose and said, "You're going to live a very long life. You're going to be fine. But if something happens to me, please promise you won't leave me and you'll bring me a red rose." And that's what she claimed. And she said for many years she was the one bringing the red rose here. I think that's a rather sweet story. So anyway, that's my little tale of Valentino. Oh yes, I might add that this was not supposed to have been his permanent resting place. The plan all along was to build Valentino this great mausoleum, and it was going to be surrounded with statues of him from all of his movie roles. But that didn't happen, and for 97 years and for all of eternity, this is his final resting place. Hey, I'm Chuck Dransfield, and I am standing on the world-famous Sunset Strip in West Hollywood, California. And behind me is the Comedy Store, a well-known comedic nightclub where many iconic comedians such as Richard Pryor, Robin Williams, Jay Leno got their start, many times with open mics here. But in the 1940s and 50s, during the golden era of old Hollywood, this was Ciro's nightclub, a great watering hole for the movie stars to gather. It was also rumored to have strong mafia connections and even mafia ownership. And it's been said that in the basement of Ciro's, some tragic things happened. People being tortured, being murdered by the mafia. Also, it was known that back alley abortions were performed here. So there are people to this day who are insistent that the Comedy Store is haunted, literally haunted by this past, and there are entities floating around, ghosts, whatever you want to call them, strange things moving, sounds. People swear they're channeling bizarre energy. They can hear entities crying out. I don't know if any of this has been substantiated, but I thought this would be a good location to come to during my month of covering haunted Hollywood. Hey, I'm Chuck Dransfield in the heart of downtown Hollywood in front of the iconic Frolic Room bar. Now, we've all heard those cliches about bars being haunted or actually being called haunts. But this does have its own unique history because it's been here since 1930. It was originally an illegal speakeasy. And over the decades, it has been visited by numerous celebrities, ranging in diversity from Eleanor Roosevelt to the Marx Brothers to Marilyn Monroe. But it is also notorious for allegedly being the final place that the Black Dahlia, Elizabeth Short, was seen alive. Now, I realize that's apocryphal because there are so many places in Hollywood and throughout Los Angeles that like to make that claim. It was the last place she was seen alive, of course, before her tragic murder in 1947. But there's a lot of evidence pointing that this likely was the last place she was seen alive. We won't know for sure, but I thought it would be an interesting story to include in my month of haunted Hollywood stories. Hey, I'm Chuck Dransfield in the heart of downtown Hollywood, California, the very source of what I'm talking about this month when I am covering haunted Hollywood for all of you. Behind me here is the Knickerbocker Hotel, which has been around since 1930. It's been used as a hideaway for stars, such as when Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio were first dating, and they just needed a hideaway. Elvis Presley allegedly stayed here. William Frolic, who played Fred Mertz on I Love Lucy, lived here for 30 years. It's been incorrectly stated that he died in the lobby of this hotel. It actually was on a sidewalk nearby when he had a fatal heart attack, unfortunately. But this is also interesting because it is considered haunted. D.W. Griffith, the famed pioneer filmmaker, he resided here in the very last years of his life. You know, his era was in the early days of silent movies, so by the 1940s he was virtually forgotten about. But nonetheless, the guests here loved him because they loved to hear his personal stories. He died here, and many insist that D.W. Griffith's spirit hangs around this hotel, I guess because it was a very happy place for him to be, very comfortable and familiar. On a sadder note, the costume designer, Irene, a big designer in the 1930s and 40s, designed for people like Carol Lombard. She fell on hard times in her final years, came here to reside, and committed suicide by jumping out an upper window and plunged to her death on the sidewalk. And many who come here and stay in her room report an eerie chill in the room, negativity, where it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. People sense something is not right, and many have felt it is the spirit of Irene still hanging around the Knickerbocker Hotel. Hey, I'm Chuck Dransfield in the heart of Hollywood and Vine on the historic Walk of Fame. I thought it would be a good idea to come directly here to the source because I am covering haunted Hollywood this month. Well, many psychics, many intuitives, empaths have long felt that this city is just circling with entities of people who came here to Hollywood, people who came here to pursue their sacred dreams. And, people wanting to be writers, people wanting to be directors, people wanting to be set designers, and of course, the people who came here wanting to be movie stars. A lot of people who've come here for, more than 90 years, wanting to pursue what was in their hearts. And for whatever reasons, not making it. People who became profoundly disappointed, people who ended up turning to drugs, to alcohol, and suicide. So many of those entities may very well be floating around this city, not wanting to leave. Many have felt that had a lot to do with why Hollywood took such a downturn after the golden era. There was a period in the 60s and 70s and 80s where this was a very run-down town, and it's only been in really the last 20 years that it has started to come back to life, back to vibrant life. Lots of rebuilding here, and structure and reinvention, and a restoration to the glory of what Hollywood once was. But I'm sure a lot of those spirits could still very well be around here. So I thought this would be a place to go to address it and share with you. Hey, I'm Chuck Transfield, and behind me here is the Hollywood Tower in the heart of downtown Hollywood. And some have claimed that it's one of the most haunted of all the hotels in this city. It was the inspiration for the Disney Hollywood Studios ride, the Hollywood Tower ride, where people take this big plunge downward. But unfortunately, it's based on a very tragic real-life story that happened in 1939. The elevators were out of service. There were 5 guests who took it upon themselves to board a maintenance elevator, and they went up several stories. A cable broke, the elevator plunged, and everybody aboard that elevator was tragically killed. Some have embellished the legend by saying that lightning struck the hotel and that's what caused the mishap. That remains to be seen, but the fact is 5 people were killed in a tragic elevator mishap, and many insist to this day those 5 souls are still hanging around this hotel. Hey, I'm Chuck Transfield in the heart of downtown Hollywood, and I am in front of the historic Pantages Theater. In the late 1940s, after Howard Hughes took over ownership of RKO Studios, this theater was owned by RKO at the time, and Howard Hughes set up his offices on the 2nd floor of this theater. Well, to this very day, people swear that Howard Hughes still haunts the Pantages Theater and makes his presence well known. Even theater goers have sworn that they have felt the presence of Mr. Hughes. Apparently a friendly spirit, but nonetheless one who still makes his presence known. Hey, I'm Chuck Transfield in the heart of downtown Hollywood, as I'm taking a month to cover haunted Hollywood. Why not be at the source? Right behind me here is the infamous Capitol Records building, which has been in operation since 1956. It was designed to purposely look like a stack of records, vinyl records, which are making a great comeback now. And on the top is a tower that every few seconds with red light emits in Morse code the word Hollywood, which is really great. But I'm covering it right now. I know these are a lot of alleged stories that are floating around, but this was where people like Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole did some of their most iconic recordings, and there are people who swear that Frank Sinatra and Nat King Cole's spirit comes here to visit from time to time. I guess just to hang out and make their presence known. Apparently they're friendly, very benign, but they are here from time to time if you listen to what people say. Hi, I'm Chuck Transfield at 584 Lillian Way in the Hancock Park district of Los Angeles, and behind me here is a home involved in one of the great unsolved crimes in Hollywood history. In 1934, 26-year-old Russ Colombo, a singing star, was embarking upon a film career and predicted to become a major, major star. His only rival at the time was Bing Crosby, and it was rumored that he was engaged to his girlfriend, the lovely Carole Lombard. Labor Day weekend of 1934, Russ Colombo was here. This was the home of well-known photographer Lansing Brown. And Lansing Brown collected guns, particularly of the Civil War era. And as the story goes, Russ was here Saturday morning, and they were looking for the guns. Russ was playing with a Civil War pistol. It fired, the ball inside ricocheted against the wall, hit the ceiling, and went back and went right through Russ Colombo's eye, straight through to the back of his brain. He miraculously survived for a few hours, but they were not able to operate or save him. It's never been clear if this was an accident or if there could have been more, because there are people who insist they heard the two men quarreling violently at this house the morning the shooting took place. So we don't know, but Lansing Brown was fully acquitted. Russ Colombo, once a promising star, has slid into obscurity, probably best known for his connection to Carole Lombard. But Lombard remained dutiful to him as for the remainder of her life, because Russ's mother was blind, she was disabled, and Carole kept the charade up that he was still alive. She would go to visit his mother and read these letters that she'd made up herself, claiming that Russ was busy traveling the world, singing in concert halls to acclaim. And that was the kind of person Carole Lombard was. So anyway, that's the story.